Well, what a relief that that's over now. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this is Right Angle Backstage. We are recording this relatively early, at least for Bill, on the morning after the final day of the 2020 presidential election.
And wasn't the final day.
What's that?
Yeah,
that wasn't the final day of the election.
We're stretching the definition of that word.
Now, before we get into that, so with the election all wrapped up, this is our planned session where we explain why President Trump either won or lost, and then what faces the country in the future. I feel, gentlemen, that there's something that constrains me from doing that.
Yeah.
The big old clusterfuck.
Let me just get this out right away. When George Soros puts $34 billion into this, this is the only thing you need to understand. It doesn't matter whether Biden wins or Trump wins. Soros's goal and the goal of the people that want to destroy this country is to destroy their faith in the institutions of this country, and this is the most important one. And that they have succeeded in doing. They have managed to succeed in making it impossible for either half of the country to accept the results of this election, and that was a no-lose situation for Soros. None. Given the manipulation of the polls, if Trump had won big, they would have said he stole it. If Biden had won big, they would have said he stole it. If it came close, they would have said the other guy stole it. And that's exactly where we are. And it is the biggest crisis in this country since the Civil War, without question. And this is what $35 billion will buy you.
What did that $35 billion get spent on, Bill?
Well, things like getting attorney generals in these various states and so on. Things like getting laws. Things like Pennsylvania saying, we think after Election Day, we might allow another week or so of voting until we figure out just how many votes we need to make up, at which point then we'll stop voting. And all the rest of this stuff, all of the early voting that we've been talking about, all of it is just designed to destroy people's faith in the system, and it has succeeded spectacularly. I have no faith in the electoral process in this country at all. And furthermore, even if these voted, I'm just going to use this term because I think it's convenient, even if the votes had been counted by God and Joe Biden wins this election, it's still stolen, because when you have a news media and big tech that not only refuse to cover stories like the Biden laptop thing, but actively impose themselves to make sure that people can't share information about it, that's stolen. I'm sorry, that's the way I see it. I am absolutely livid about this. Livid.
Yeah.
All that stuff you said, though, Bill, while I don't disagree with it, and some of it I don't disagree because I don't know enough, but other parts of it I don't disagree because I kind of agree. Nevertheless, if we keep claiming that there's some mysterious force out there that's stealing elections from us when, half the country says that they agree with us, I don't understand how these entities are able to continue to sustain themselves when the vast majority of Republicans, anyway, think that they're evil, malign forces that are somehow twisting our minds into doing something we wouldn't have ordinarily done. I don't get that.
Let me clarify this for you.
Yeah.
When the New York Times runs with a story for 2 years about Russian collusion that was placed by the Hillary Clinton campaign, doesn't investigate it, doesn't do its job in finding out about it, and when the deep state FBI launches an investigation and impeachment proceedings against the president based on information that they personally invented, and then the country has to go through that, and then we had 2 years of this constant nonstop coverage of this, and nothing on Joe Biden, nothing on Hunter Biden, nothing on Barack Obama, nothing on Hillary Clinton, nothing. That's how it happens. And
what you're effectively saying is that there's no market for straight down the middle or even conservative-leaning news, because otherwise, if half the country would support such a thing, why don't we see it?
This is way past market.
Yeah, that's
There's
what
nothing. Market's got nothing to do with it. Market has nothing to do with it. Nothing. This is ideological warfare, and the Hunter Biden laptop story is the smoking gun of evidence. It's the smoking gun of evidence of them not only looking into a credible story, but not only even having the news media suppress it, but break the connections that allow you and me to share the story by basically saying, "Hey, Scott, did you hear about this?" Guess what? My phone call's been cut off because I'm about to talk about something that the phone company doesn't like.
Bill, I know you've said that repeatedly, but I got to tell you, and this is not an episode of Bill Whittle Now. And by the way, while we're doing this, let me just share this is the T-shirt that one of our members made for me. This is one of our members named Phil, who apparently
I love that.
thought that this would be a good way to protect my reputation or something. But I got to tell you, I'm not even on social media. And I just kind of skim news feed sources, and I read the major left-wing media, of course, to keep apprised of what's going on with people who disagree with me. But all of that said, there's been no shortage of my access to the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. I've seen things about it on YouTube. When I'm posting videos at your Facebook page, I see stuff about it there all the time. I'm not sure that people don't know about it. It's just for some reason the New York Post and Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, who had access to this information, haven't been able to present that in a way that people go, oh my goodness, that's like the James Comey, Hillary Clinton reopening the case.
So what does that tell you? What does that tell you? If for no other reason, Hunter Biden's laptop contained the personal phone numbers of virtually every member of the Secret Service and top-ranking U.S. officials, and that this was given to him by somebody. Hunter Biden didn't just invent these phone numbers. These actual phone numbers ended up on his laptop, which ended up in a repair shop someplace. And so I want to know how those phone numbers got onto that laptop and why he has them. And then I want to know why this whole thing with this top secret information on it, national security level information on it, ended up in a repair shop. But mostly I want to know why the New York Times doesn't think that's worth reporting on. That's what I want to know.
Or the reporting they did do is, this is a big nothing
it's a
burger
Russian
and you can safely
disinformation
ignore it.
campaign,
It's just Fox News and the New York
Post. Which there is no evidence for whatsoever, and which the director of national intelligence said there's no evidence for whatsoever. It is absolutely impossible to have a democracy without a fair press. And we've been in this situation for 30 years now. 30 years. Evan Thomas in 2004 said that media bias was worth 15 points. It's worth 50 now. It's worth 50 points. And you were able to see that story, Scott, because you went looking for it.
I actually didn't go looking for it, Bill. I get like news feeds from, there's an app called Smart News. There's Google News, occasionally Yahoo News. Now I do read the New York Times, and I just recently started rereading the Washington Post. And by just recently, I mean this morning. But it's not like I got to dig around to find this story. And I just wonder. Again, I said this to you yesterday, Bill, but I wonder how much of this is going to prevent us from doing any real analysis of our own opportunities and weaknesses and the threats internally to the Republican Party or the conservative movement, because we're always blaming somebody else for the fact that we didn't do what we said we wanted to do.
I am standing by this. I see it every single day. We've all seen it every single day. We have seen the news media function as a operative of the Democratic Party. We've seen the FBI actually involved in creating evidence to create this entire illusion of Russian collusion. And that's not something I made up, and that's not a figment of my imagination. And if you take the entire 24/7 news coverage of the last 4 years about Donald Trump being a Russian puppet, and you take that out of the mix, then you've got an entirely different election. And if you take Joe Biden's connections to Chinese money, you got another entirely different connection. And if you take the fact that the 220,000 people who died of COVID-19, 94% of them had 2.5 comorbidities, you have another different election. And none of that stuff is reported, none of it. And that to me is fraud. If you were a news agency and you do not cover a story, then you are adding credence to the idea that there's no story there to cover.
And I can agree with all that, but let me pause for a moment, because this is a backstage episode. And I don't know about you, Steve, but Bill, you sound like you're coming in really hot in my earbud right now.
No, I'll turn the volume down.
Yeah.
Are you getting the same thing, Steve?
How's my audio here?
I don't know. You haven't said anything yet.
Well, I do have things to say.
Yeah, that's better. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But anyway, Bill, I didn't want to go the whole episode.
No,
with,
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. I was all the way up, and I'm sure it's nothing but distortion. But that's kind of the sound I want right now.
Did you bring it down to 11?
I brought it down to 13.
So, Stephen Green, the perfectly modulated moderator. Obviously, Bill and I have different views on this, how this situation goes, and I'm not discounting any of the stuff he said, really, Steve. I'm just thinking all of that I could stipulate and still say, is that the only thing we need to be thinking about in the wake of a situation where we don't know yet, but, if the president should lose the election, do we look back and say, well, all of our deep self-analysis will say we were robbed, and let's move on to the next time and do the same thing we did before?
Well, what I'm still fuming about is a slightly smaller picture than Bill, but maybe just as important. That's what I'm going to call in my segment the coup at Fox News. Chris Starwalt was their decision desk guy, and he is a partisan Democrat running Fox News's decision desk. And that desk did everything they could to suppress Republican turnout last night. They refused to call Florida and Texas for hours after virtually everybody else had. This may have been enough to suppress turnout in Nevada and Arizona. They called Arizona based on voter surveys while people were still standing in line to try and vote. Absolutely ridiculous. What started as a running joke last night on the PJ Media Live blog. Good God, why haven't they called Texas?
Or Florida.
Eventually, or Florida, but Texas especially, quickly turned to anger. Trump was ahead in Florida before the Panhandle results came in. And the Panhandle, of course, is an hour behind and heavily Republican. At that point, Florida's a lock. The only reason for Fox News not to call Florida is because conservatives tend to watch Fox News, and if you want to dispirit them, you keep Florida a question mark. If you wanted to dispirit Republicans who are watching Fox News, you keep Texas a question mark. And then voters in Arizona and Nevada start looking at their watches. They've been standing in line for a couple hours wondering, what the hell am I still doing here if Texas is in play? Texas was never in play. Florida was done hours before Fox News called it. This was absolutely voter suppression on the part of Chris Starwalt of Fox News.
Now, Steve, was Starwalt the actual decision desk guy? Because from time to time, they brought on this other guy who they said was the real behind-the-scenes decision desk guy. Wasn't Starwalt just a mouthpiece for whoever was actually running it?
Well, that's a great question, but I mean, look at what happened. Look at the guy who, even if he's just the mouthpiece, who is underneath the mouthpiece? A puppet has a hand up its ass. That's the way this works.
I will admit that Starwalt has a smile that makes it look like he's got a hand. Well, never mind.
Yes.
So how is it that Fox News had a guy who donated huge amounts of money to Obama and Clinton calling the election for Fox News? How did that happen?
That's why I'm calling it a coup.
Yeah, there you go. I'm with you on this one. And the impact
of that is early announcements of states that are not done counting yet discourages Republican voters in those states when the polls are still open. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. The Democrats banked their votes early. Republicans were banking on Election Day. And the Democrats had two advantages in this. One, I didn't see coming. The first one is when you've got all this advance voting, it's much easier to come up with the ballots you need to tip a state. The one I didn't see coming was Chris Starwalt with his finger on the scales in order to suppress the same-day voting, which is how we used to do things in this country. We have an election day, and that's the day we vote. Yeah. This is, and the thing is, I still think Trump wins this. It's going to be messy. It's going to be ugly. But when I went to bed last night, he was at 274 or 275, depending on the one splittable vote in in Maine that he got last time around. That's pretty good. But what
Have
we're
you
looking
checked
at
this
right
morning?
now are
You mean
Democratic efforts
projections,
to
274,
overturn
275.
North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Trump was ahead of the margin of fraud plus 2 points, 700,000 votes last night. And that's when Philly, the most corrupt city in the country when it comes to making up ballots, decided to stop counting last night. So magically, they're going to come up with 700,000 extra ballots in Philly. That'd be a hell of a theft if they could do it.
Well,
One of my favorite things.
They sent out about 400,000.
I did not hear one thing of those. That was all garbled.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was garbled coming into your earpiece?
Absolutely. It was just absolute gibberish.
Pennsylvania was a lock last night, and then they stopped counting the votes in Philadelphia.
Right. And Georgia, too.
Yeah, because
and Arizona, too.
Yeah. And it's in Philly. It's in Atlanta. And
in Georgia, when Georgia cut the vote for 4 hours, counting the vote for 4 hours, it said it was because of burst water main and some software problems.
Yeah. They said a 4-hour delay was going to cause 4 days worth of delays. The level of thievery going on in these big blue cities is maybe unparalleled. Kennedy and Johnson just probably stole 2 states, Illinois and Texas, for the election. What's going on right now is so much bigger than that. Plus the media in on it. I still think Trump pulls this out. But
so they said in Philadelphia,
we don't know yet.
The state of Pennsylvania has something like 9 million registered voters, 2.5 million of which requested mail-in ballots. 400,000 of those, I think, were in Philadelphia proper, not including the collar counties, which are also Democrat strongholds. Yeah. And so, even if all 400,000 of those go to Biden, and they think it's about a 2-to-1 advantage of Democrats rather than Republicans requesting those ballots. Pittsburgh, however, may actually counterbalance the influence of Philadelphia. Trump campaigned hard in Pittsburgh, and it looks like he is doing well there. But I think you're right. We're not going to find out for a while. I don't make the instant assumption that because there's a delay, therefore there's stuff in the ballot boxes. But I do wonder why, when I walked into the polling place in Little Elm, Texas, I literally had a paper ballot. I had to fill in these little rectangles with an ink pen, as we used to call them. And then after I was done, I haven't
heard that term ever.
I walked over to this machine that looked like a scanner fax copier, and I stuck the ballot in the machine, and the guy said, "Wait there until the American flag appears on the screen." And it went zzz, and about a second and a half later, an American flag came up on the screen, and that's my ballot being counted. And I thought, they're saying they can only do 10,000 ballots an hour in Philadelphia, 10 to 12,000 with no interruptions. Do they not have one of those machines? Can we get one for them?
Send over all of yours. Texas did a pretty good job last night.
Have you heard the Arizona Sharpie story?
Yeah. Well, I heard it from you, actually.
I
think I watched the Stratosphere Lounge.
Oh, well, thank you. People, this came to me live. I am simply just reporting what I heard in the comment section, but I've seen it in a few places. The allegation is that a number of people who went to vote in Arizona were put into a booth, and instead of being given a pen, they were given a Sharpie. And so they voted with a Sharpie because that's what was in front of them. And since the Sharpie bleeds through the ballot is invalidated.
Good Lord.
Now, if that's the case, then that is just plain thievery. Period.
2 Sharpie gates in 1 year.
What do you say about that? Now again, this is anecdotal, and I'm not going to try and start rumors that cannot be substantiated, but nevertheless, what the rumors are saying is that there were people who went in there and started to vote with a black pen and were told not to. So if this is the case, then Arizona, if that's the case, then every single ballot in Arizona has to be recounted. I'm beyond words. I'm beyond words on this. And I'm not inclined to lie down for this one, frankly. I'm not. No. Not inclined to lie down for this one and say, well, geez, no, I'm not. I am not.
Yeah, this isn't 1960 again.
Or even 2000 again.
Yeah.
So how do we divide this up in terms of practicality of doing episodes of Right Angle? By the way, is this my week to do 2 episodes?
Yeah, well, lucky you.
Yeah, thanks. Good, because I don't even have one topic, let alone two. Actually, I have a couple of ideas, but I just thought, well, we're all going to want to talk about the same thing. So how do we break this up? Steve has already laid claim to the coup at Fox News, frankly, one that did not occur to me. I was kind of channel hopping, although I did watch Fox News. By the way, Bill Hemmer on Fox News, who came over from what? Like CNN or MSNBC, didn't he? He was with one of those other networks. Anyway, I think he did a better job at that board pointing out the results coming in.
He was great.
And what they meant. Because I watched, who's the gray hair guy on CNN? Not Wolf Blitzer, the other gray hair guy. John something, maybe?
Yeah. It is John something, and I'm spacing on it right now.
He was just standing in front of this board, rattling off numbers, hopping back and forth between 2016 and 2020 results. He was literally incomprehensible. And I was just staring at it going, what is he saying? And then you go over to Fox News, and Bill Hemmer was very methodical. He made it clear what he was talking about. He gave,
Yep, that's what I meant, Hemmer.
What's that?
I meant Hemmer. He was terrific.
Yeah. So
terrific.
So anyway, so coup at Fox News is one, and then I've got to do two, and Bill's got to do one. So here are the notes that I jotted to self, and I think I'll take this one. Since it's I get to go before you do. The failure, as widely acknowledged now in the left-wing media, the utter failure of the polling enterprise to be able to give accurate information about what was coming up. And basically, the people on the left had been looking forward not only to a big election night for Joe Biden, where it would be a clear result and the word landslide was bandied about, but they also thought that Biden's coattails would sweep in some Senate seats. Lindsey Graham would go down. Mitch McConnell might go down. Tom Tillis was going to go down. Susan Collins was going to go down. All of these people were going to lose. And Democrats spent something like $208 million to Republicans spending about half that much in those races. And as far as we could tell, every one of those races, the Republican senator won.
Yeah.
And so how is it possible that that any pollster will ever again show his face on national television, or that any journalist will confidently assert what the polls are saying about the election?
Because shame is dead.
You don't understand. You don't understand.
I think I do.
The pollsters did exactly what they were supposed to do. They performed perfectly. This is the thing that people do not get. They performed perfectly. When they say that Biden has a 15-point lead and it's down to the wire, then that is a disinformation campaign designed to suppress Republican votes, and that is what the polls are all about. And that's what the network reporting on the polls is all about.
That's not how they sell it to the people who are watching it. So even Democrats now, when they hear that, the push poll power has got to be completely bled out of this thing when they look at it and go, holy cow, they were wrong again. That was wrong in 2016. They were wrong in 2020. Why would I pay attention to any of that anymore?
What makes you think it would be different after how wrong they were in 2016? What makes you think things would be different in 2024? This is not about measuring voter response or voter likelihood. This is about suppressing votes and setting up the narrative. And it's not just setting up the narrative to suppress votes, because if Trump had won by a significant margin last night, then the Democrats would be saying that's not possible. He was up by 15 points. He was up by 12 points. Got to have stolen the election. This whole thing is a gigantic operation designed to basically destroy Americans' trust in the system. And when I say that this is a planned operation, George Soros put $34,000 million into this. That's not my number. I didn't invent it. I didn't come up with it. It's not Alex Jones's number. That is what the Soros Foundation has spent on this kind of stuff. And that alone is a news story, which is not covered ever. So I'm sorry. No, I'm not going to go quietly into the good
Bill,
night.
I think you're not disagreeing with me. You're just saying what they're trying to do. I don't challenge what you say they're trying to do. I believe that is the fact, although I don't think that's how they'd explain it. What I'm saying is, are you suggesting that every Democrat and a lot of other people are in on it too, and they're like, yes, push me to the polls.
They don't have to be. They don't have to be.
First of all, believe.
They don't have to be in on it. It's not something that they have to be in on. It's like a weather report. Okay, it's like the weather report. It's like them saying, hurricanes are expected throughout the Southeast and tornadoes throughout the Midwest today. So you better stay inside. Nobody's going to look at that and say, well, geez, there's some kind of
but if it was
malign
wrong
force.
Every time, I think at some point you stop watching the weather, don't you?
Well, it was as wrong as it could be in 2016, and people still watching the weather, Scott.
That was considered an aberration. Now we've got a trend.
Okay, so now we have two aberrations. And after they do it again in 2024, assuming there's still anybody left who can actually vote in 2024, then it'll be three aberrations. And it's going to continue to be aberrations because the media industrial complex controls all of this, controls the narrative. And that's why I was happy that Donald Trump came out and said that this is fraud, because he put a marker on the narrative. Now,
so you think there'll still be a great market for people watching polling information or reading polling information, knowing full well that it's been massively wrong twice in a row when it really mattered?
Scott, you would think that after 2016, it would be clear to people that this stuff is worthless, but it wasn't. So how many elections of worthlessness do you need? I would have thought that 2016's predictions, being as far off as they were, would have been enough to destroy polling. And it did, because it's not about polling. It's not about polling. You're still
going from the viewpoint of the people pushing the poll, not from the people who are watching it or reading the information. And that's my point. This
is like saying when somebody's doing a game of 3-card Monte, I don't expect them to tell me it's actually not underneath any of the shells. I'm going to do the sleight of hand. No matter which one you pick up, you cannot win this game, because as I move these shells around, the little ball's not underneath any of them.
And
this is why 3-card Monte works, because it's a sleight of hand trick. It's not a probability trick. It's a sleight of hand trick. You cannot win 3-card Monte. Because, well, they'll let you win in the beginning so that you can think you can win. Yeah. But you cannot win 3-card Monte, because if you're looking at this thing trying to figure out which one the ball is under, it's not under any of them. Ever. And that's what I'm talking about. It's the people who are performing the fraud and the scam are not only not obligated to not tell you about it, it is in their interest to not let you know what's going on.
So the upshot of it is, and because I have now failed on my 4th attempt to get you to understand why I want to do this topic.
Keep trying.
The upshot of it is that people are so incredibly gullible that not only the Democrats, but you and I will continue to read polling information, watch videos where people are talking about polling information, and we will believe that there is some shred of credibility to this. And even though we know they're trying to push us in a particular direction, the Democrats may not realize the nefarious intent, but they certainly by now have got to say, you know what, screw this. Those people are wrong all the time. But the Democrats are all going to be dupes. They're going to continue to watch it. CNN's going to continue to put major prominence to it, as will the New York Times.
Okay, so let's say that people suddenly realize that polling is absolutely worthless, right? We've seen it in 2016, saw it in 2020. Polling is absolutely worthless. And polling is no longer a factor on people's decisions going forward. But if that kind of polling and that kind of psychological warfare cost us the 2020 election, then what difference does it make? Everybody went in all in on this. Everybody did. Big tech did. All of them.
Also, the people reading the news are not the pollsters' customers. You and me and our viewers don't pay for those polls. They're paid for by the news organizations who are
CBS
still making
News
enough
poll,
money from basically advertisements from large progressive companies that it's a self-perpetuating machine.
And they know they can still get eyeballs even though people don't believe them.
Then, well, most people watch the news for entertainment value.
Okay.
And what do you mean people don't believe them?
This is like a fantasy football league, and people just enjoy the bandying about of potential statistics. And
Scott, are you telling me that you don't think that the Democrats believed those polls going into the election?
No, I'm telling you, I don't think that they should believe them now.
Well, should is a lovely thing, you know. There's a lot of things that should happen. You should be able to look at the COVID-19 numbers and say, well, with 94% of the total deaths having 2.5 comorbidities, we're looking at 9,000, 10,000 total deaths from this thing. That's what should happen, but it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen because the news doesn't report it. That's CDC numbers, not my numbers. That's what the CDC says. That story should have been front page news, and it wasn't. And that's fraud.
So the next time around, they're going to pitch this and they're basically say, hey, we learned our lesson from 2016 and 2020.
They don't want to learn a lesson.
There is no next time.
This time
around.
we've radically changed our polling methods so that we can give you accurate results.
There is no next time around. Okay? There is no next time around. Because the grip that big tech and all of these other things have on the system have been great enough to swing this election. And if it turns out they do swing the election and the Department of Justice goes to Biden and Harris, then there will be no investigation into the FBI's sponsorship of the entire Russian collusion thing, which led to the president's impeachment, which I imagine damaged his prospects among independents. I would say that might have an effect on it. And there will be no investigation into any of this stuff about when. Remember 15 days to flatten the curve? I remember it because I've got it on tape. Right?
Yeah.
I have it printed on my Mac.
March.
At what point do you think a fair media would have started saying, Dr. Fauci, you told us that we needed 15 days to flatten the curve in order to make sure that we didn't exceed our hospital bed capability. Now, that happened in the middle of April. Why are we still in this lockdown? And what are the metrics for us coming out of the lockdown? You would think that question would be asked, but it wasn't asked, ever. And this is what I'm talking about. Fish that swim in the ocean don't see the water, and this is the world that we swim in. And it's
I guess
it's
this is
utterly
good news
corrupt.
for pollsters.
You will never, ever, ever, ever not make money by telling politicians, or let me rephrase that. You will never not make money by going to a client and telling them you can deliver what they want to hear.
Okay, so my second topic is and because of when we're recording this on Wednesday, November 4th, and when we still don't have the final results, I'd like to talk about no matter who wins, given what we do know, what does the coming, at least the first couple of years, look like of the new presidential administration, given the fact that Republicans have managed to hold the Senate, and that Republicans have actually increased the numbers of their caucus in the House. By last I heard, it was like 10. Maybe Steve knows a better number than that.
That's the last I heard. I think that's
they
right.
were expected to be driven down to like 180 Republican House members, and now they're over 200. And so it's going to make things more difficult to accomplish even in the House. So if President Trump manages to pull this out and gets reelected, he's still got his Senate for appointments, confirmations of judges, and he's got a much more vigorous Republican caucus in the House. If Biden becomes president of the United States, then who does he appoint? How is he going to get his little court, if you believe he's doing a court packing scheme, or even in his description, his blue ribbon panel to evaluate changes to the judiciary, how does he get that past a Republican-controlled Senate and a House that has a much stronger Republican caucus?
Those Republican senators are not locked in yet, by the way.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
they're continuing to find votes that are continuing to be counted, and the lead on all of those Republican senators is closing rapidly.
The blue ribbon panels are where bad ideas go to die, but to look good while they do it.
That's a way of kind of saying I'm doing something, but I'm not really doing anything.
Yeah. I don't see him getting away with court packing with a GOP Senate. In fact, they would need probably a supermajority in the Senate to get that done. I don't see that happening. All I can say is God bless gridlock, because if Biden takes this thing, it's the only thing that's going to save us for the next 2 years.
Well, yeah, and you just think you're Joe Biden and you win this thing, and they say, congratulations, Biden, you just won, and you're pretty much a one-term president anyway, just because of your dotage. You just won, and now you're just going to spend the most miserable first 2 years at least, and possibly 4 years, that any president's ever had, because you won't be able to advance any of your ideas.
Yeah.
And of all the news stories, all of them, including the Hunter Biden laptop, Joe Biden's dotage is the biggest one of all, and that wasn't covered either.
Just
that
buried.
Was never. Not only was it not only covered, it never covered. It's like, hey, you just got a milkshake, Mr. Biden. What's your favorite flavor? What do you call that?
What was it?
What do you call that?
That was the last tough question he got from the press. What flavor ice cream did you get? And God bless him, he ordered it 2 minutes ago. He might not know.
I think I'm offended by all this ageist talk.
It's not ageist. Trump's only 3-4 years younger than Biden. Good God, the man's a machine.
By the way, one of our members posted in the discussion, I think it was actually on the member blog, so it was a comment about that. They've posted a couple of different videos, and some of them are kind of lame, but there's one where all it is just little clips of President Trump doing his goofy little dance to the Village People's YMCA, and they cut it nicely, so he's on the beat a lot of the time. And I tell you, it was just one of the most joyful little things I've seen in the last 6 months.
It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
And all of that momentum, all of that surge, all of that enthusiasm, all of those Trump trains, all of that stuff, all of the social proof that's behind that, all of the willingness for people to say, hey, maybe I will vote for Trump. I kind of like him, but I never saw any reason to do it before because I always felt like I was the last one. How many votes got locked out of that?
Yeah.
By this, let's vote 3 months early. And I'm taking this to you answer this question for me if you can defend early voting. Why don't we just simply submit our votes for the 2024, 2028, and 2032 elections now? Why don't we just submit them now? Why don't we just put in, I vote for generic Democrat candidate for president? Because you cannot make the same argument. You cannot make an argument for early voting that does not end up in that place.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any kind of line that you would have to draw that would say
precisely correct.
At a certain point, it's too early.
It's like the
day
entire
before the election is too early.
It is the abortion issue. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the abortion issue. It is either conception or it is birth. There is nothing in between those two things. Those are the two milestones that determine this particular aspect of what we're talking about.
There's no bright line.
So there is either an election day or you vote now for the rest of your life. And there is nothing on the road between here and there to do that. I think that's probably what I'm going to focus on for mine. That's what I want to do.
Okay, so what's your focus?
It's going to be the early voting voting fraud.
The forever vote.
I still don't get, like, let's just say, and I'll tip my hand here. States have the ability to set the qualifications of the electors, of the voters in their states, and states can control how the elections are conducted. And state voters in those states also have the ability to throw out the people who approve such things, whether that's the governor or the mayor of a city and how they're going to conduct themselves. And of course, the doors to the courtroom are still open, and the Supreme Court now has a purported 6-3 conservative majority. And so if any of that stuff, the way the voting process has been handled is possibly unconstitutional, I think we've got a fair shot at it if we'll take it to the Supreme Court and challenge that. But all of that said, I'm not willing to say that fraud has been committed unless I see evidence of fraud having been committed. And at the same time, I don't understand how, given 2 months in advance to vote, you can't get it done by November 3rd. Why is that? I mean, I had 1 day to get it done. It was only a single. In fact, I didn't even have a whole day because I had to go to work the second half of that day. So I really had 3 hours during which I could have voted in the entire year. I nailed it.
So what do you think? What do you think the answer to that is, Scott? What do you think the answer to that is? Since the votes and the ballots had been in there for weeks and months in many cases, what do you think the answer is to them saying, well, we just got to stop counting now because we can't possibly stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning, so we'll just count them tomorrow? Why do you think that happened?
Well, I thought you'd be happy about that because you didn't want them to count anything after the polls, after the election day.
No.
Oh, no.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about counting votes that were in place on time. So why did that pause?
Here's the on its face, simple Occam's razor answer. It's late at night. You don't have an unlimited staff. You need to get some rest and wake up the next morning and continue counting. It's going to take several days anyway. You know that. And so get some rest, come back in the morning, and we'll continue plodding on. Staring at 10,000 ballots an hour is a tedious process. And so that is the not unreasonable answer that they would give on that side. I'm not saying that's the true answer, but that is not unreasonable.
I think it's unreasonable.
It is unreasonable, particularly when it's one blue city and a sea of red.
And well, there's a lot more people there.
And furthermore, this idea that, well, there's only 300 people in the country who can count votes. And, I notice that the firemen and the policemen don't say, you know what, it's getting a little late. I think I'm just going to go home. And if they can't keep a crew up for 24 hours once every 2 years, then that tells me something too. I'm sorry. I do not see this as being something that I guess it's just the way it happened.
I think that I've been in that ballot counting room because one of my elections was close enough to check up on them as they were counting them. So I sat in the room while they were counting ballots as they came in, the mail ballots. And it is a mind-numbingly tedious process that if it had dragged on for more time than it did, I would have said, hey, everybody, you're increasing your opportunity to make mistakes here because you're going into a brain freeze here.
All right.
Go get a nap, come back and do it later.
I will counter with this. Why aren't they still counting California's votes? There's far more votes to count in California than there are in Michigan. Why did those votes get counted in record time? Why?
I didn't know that was the case.
It is the case. No one's disputing the numbers in California. And why is it that the votes couldn't be counted overnight in the battleground states, but no one said in Alabama? Alabama didn't say, well, you know what, guys, we're just completely overwhelmed. We can't possibly count these things this morning. And the same thing for Delaware, by the way. Delaware didn't say, overwhelming. It's just too many votes. We can't possibly count them now. We're going to have to take a break and come back in the morning. Why is it the battleground states were the ones that took a break last night? You don't find that a little odd?
And universally blue cities in states that were otherwise red.
Yeah.
I mean, just on the face of it is corrupt.
Steve.
Absolutely.
That's what?
That's where the people are. That's where the massive population.
There's more people in Los Angeles and New York City than there are in Detroit, Scott, or Madison. And those votes, nobody in New York or California said, we got to give up. It's too late. And if you're telling me that they didn't stop counting because the vote was already in, that's not how it works. They have to count every vote too. They have to count every single vote, even if the state goes completely blue or completely red. Don't you find it odd that none of the total blue states or none of the total red states, many of which have larger populations than the battleground states, none of those states had any problem counting the votes? None of them. But the ones where the election would be turned, oh, geez, we're getting kind of tired. I don't know. I think maybe we should go home and get a rest.
Yeah, and a bigger city means more precincts with more poll workers and more people to count the damn votes. That's a wash.
They don't count them in the polling place. That gets
I understand.
I understand,
but if you're telling me that Detroit can't count votes in the same way that a rural county in Michigan can, simply because they're bigger, that's utter horse because they've got more people to count.
And you can't make the argument that, gee, it's more people because Los Angeles got their votes in on time and Miami got their votes in on time. New York City didn't have to wait. Nobody had to wait. The only places that had to wait were the places where if Trump had won or if Trump did win, then the election's over. Those are the ones that suddenly had a problem counting. I wonder if some of those
states allowed the processing, at least, if not the counting of ballots in advance of Election Day, or the processing in advance and then the count begins at the beginning of Election Day, whereas Pennsylvania and some of these other states may have done it where the processing and counting doesn't happen until after the polls close.
This is starting to sound more and more like special pleading to me, pal.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to cut out a rational explanation for why this happened in those states. And you're right to do that. You're right to do that. But the bigger picture is that those special pleading cases that happened in the battleground states did not happen in any of the other states that went one way or another, both of which have larger and smaller populations than the states in question, some of which were Republican and some of which were Democrat. So now you find yourself saying, well, these are logical reasons why this didn't happen in these 4 battleground states. But those logical reasons should apply to all 50 states, and it didn't happen in the other 46. So now you start having to ask yourself, why is it that these battleground states are the ones that we have to come up with special excuses for?
I'm just wondering, like, I'm thinking, okay, let's say the reason why they stopped the count was because they wanted to stuff the ballot box, or they wanted to come up with a bunch of ballots that didn't appear to be there beforehand. So how brazen of you to say, it's like, okay, it's midnight. Okay, guys, we're going to shut the doors for a while. We don't want you to see what's going on here. We're going to bring in a truckload of ballots.
Starting with Russia collusion, it's been nothing but brazenness for 4 years.
That's what happened. And that's why the president of the United States says everything's going great and we're getting all these results and things are going our way and we're up by 700,000 votes. And all of a sudden, the election's over. They stop counting. He's as mystified as anybody else is. I'm mystified too. I don't understand it. And I don't believe it. I don't. I do not believe that there is a rational explanation for this that does not consist of gross interference in the electoral process.
I'll grant that I don't understand it. I agree with you. I don't understand it. On the other hand, until I see evidence of corruption, I'm not going to immediately assume, well, it must be corruption.
It's corrupt on the absolute face of it.
The fact that it stopped counting is the evidence of the corruption. That's the evidence. The fact that it stopped is the evidence. The fact that it stopped in battleground states and didn't stop anywhere else, that's the evidence. It's not a question of, gee, can we prove they stole enough votes? The fact that they stopped the process is the evidence.
I think that is a fact that deserves that people should press questions. I think it deserves an answer, and I think they need to have a legitimate answer for it. I don't think it means prima facie corruption.
Well, who's going to press the case when the press is in on it?
The legitimate answer for Cobb County delaying their votes for 4 hours was because there was a ruptured water main, and that's why they couldn't report the votes. Because they actually had a ruptured water main.
Is water involved in the counting process in some way?
It was very convenient that there was a water main burst that could cause them to delay the voting, or the counting rather, but that none of the ballots were water damaged, so they don't have to account for any loss other than time.
And by the way, if this is the case, I would like to see photographs. I would like to see photographs of that particular building in question with water up to people's ankles at least. I want to see the evidence. If you're telling me that the water main ruptured this and delayed the vote for 4 hours, then everybody in there has a cell phone. I want to see pictures of that water gushing out, and I want to see people standing so deep in water that they cannot possibly ever find a way to count those votes for 4 hours. I want to see the evidence.
Well, I think we're going to have some fun with these topics.
Yeah.
If by, spiking your blood pressure is what you mean by fun.
Listen, pal, if this is not worth spiking your blood pressure over, then God made a mistake in giving you blood pressure in the first place. Okay, if this isn't enough to get your blood pressure up, then you probably don't deserve to have blood pressure.
That's probably true. So we have now, I'm going to suggest, guys, that as soon as we're done this episode, that we immediately get this video over to our editor, and then
immediately put it up right away.
Start shooting the other.
And let's make this. And this one goes
until we're done shooting all the episodes, and then we upload the video.
And this one goes public. This one's not for members only today.
Right.
Okay. It's just a decision. And
I would have worn a nicer shirt if I'd known that.
That's fine.
We're going to go wear nicer shirts.
We need to put the backstage show up there, and we need to say, and it needs to say, hot take first reactions the morning after the election.
Can we say smoking hot take?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, smoking hot take is fine with me. And you can use the term bleeding edge if you want to. That's fine too. But yes, this has to go up right now, and it has to go up for everybody.
How about bleeding out? Can I
that's a pretty good example of what's actually happening.
By the way, and this is just for the backstage people. So when we post something to Facebook, we can see a little count of like how many Facebook engagements there were on that issue. And we do some pretty serious issues of great import to the American people that get a lot of Facebook engagements. But I'm telling you, and this is going back to the smoking hot thing, Bill, I don't think we've had more engagement around anything than around a little kind of for the good of the order process post that we made that basically said, okay, here's what we're going to do on election day, just so you know. And then here's a picture that Natasha took of Bill. And that eye candy shot has, I think, resulted in us getting like 10 times the normal engagement on Facebook.
Photomelnikova.com, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone can look like that if you marry a top quality photographer or hire her.
And Photomelnikova is the F word, isn't it?
Photomelnikova.com. Photomelnikova with an F as in the way the communist Europeans would spell it. And yes, that's entirely the reason that picture looks as good as it does, because I don't look that good.
She does amazing work, and this is not a...
And no photo retouching, by the way. No, nothing.
That's straight out of the camera, baby.
Yep.
This is not a paid endorsement, by the way, although, Photomelnikova, we are open to paid endorsements. So if you want to start
How does that work?
Paying for these mentions,
So we take in advertising money, which I give to my wife, which we then use to spend on keeping the company open. So we'll figure it out. It doesn't matter. It's going to require forensic accounting.
All right,
let me just say one
gentlemen.
thing. One last thing, Scotty. I want to it's not a question of the Facebook comments or anything else. I just want to tell you personally, this is between you and me, and I'm sure Steve feels the same way. I deeply admire your commitment to fairness and calmness and fair play. Deeply, deeply admire it. It is an essential part of this show. It's an essential part of this company, and it is an essential part of having a republic where people can live together. Your inclination for fair play from every angle all the time has been so badly misconstrued, but from me, I have nothing but absolute undying respect for it. Wrong though you are, I still have, in all seriousness, I deeply, deeply, deeply admire and respect you for it. Very, very much.
I just echo what Bill said. Thank you for that.
That's very kind. And before I say something stupid that'll ruin all of that, for Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching. We'll see you this week on Right Angle.